live once again. Welcome to the Not a Rabbi podcast. This is episode 2 of season 2, a podcast where I have ruled we do not have to have a Shabbos goy for the space lasers. And yes, we will be getting into the space lasers a little bit later on with a new segment of the show. And we'll be unveiling that title and that all that information a little bit later on. But before we get into it, welcome everybody who is joining into the live chat here on the channel of the Fifth Column Discord server. So I appreciate everybody coming in, and if anybody does have a question, don't hesitate to pop up and ask the question as well, because I like to have the feedback and I work better in a crowd. I guess what we could start off with is I posted to this Discord channel, actually, the Fifth Column Discord, is a question about what topic you guys wanted to hear about. And I had given several topics. Some of them I thought were going to be more interesting. Some of them I thought not as interesting, but I added it. And I think it was on somebody's suggestion. I don't remember if it was or if I put it in myself, but I'm going to say I put it in myself because, hey, that's how I roll. It came up, the topic that wanted to be discussed this episode was the topic of an Eruv. Now, I'm actually fascinated in the reasoning why, and if anybody who did vote for Eruv would like to chip in and explain their reasoning for it, I would be more than interested to hear what the reasoning was. But if you don't want to, that's okay also, and we can just go along with with this. Exceptions to rules are always fascinating. Okay, DJ, thank you for that. And yes, narco-Bidenist does not know what the topic means, so let's get into what the topic means so we can go through that a little bit. And I'm going to try to break this down as easily as I can. Just as a brief introduction to this, a pre-introduction, for lack of a better term. There is an entire tractate of the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, and also the Jerusalem Talmud, and it deals with this topic. Additionally, this is one of the 3 tractates that in Hebrew have the acronym of POR, which is one of the letters for the acronym of POR. The word POR in Hebrew, which is Ayin, Nun, and Yud, and Eruvin begins with an Ayin. So it's this is a very, very complex. What I'm trying to get at is this is a very, very complex topic. The tractate is complex as well. Having gone through it twice, I can definitely tell you that, and probably a little bit more intelligent about it than I had been when I started that 7.5 years ago. One of the 39 major violations or Sabbath violations. So one of them 39 main things that you are not allowed to do on Shabbos, on the Sabbath, is or carry. When you talk about the carrying, that in a biblical idea is carrying from outside of one's private domain. And again, there's a lot to be said about this, so I'm trying to keep it as simple as I possibly can. But the topic of so it has to be always in one person's or a person's private domain, where you are either joined with that in that private domain, so you're a partner in it, or you are going ahead and it's your own private domain. And so that is one type of domain that there is. There are 2 types of domains that I want to speak about and mention here that are really the most important. And this is the one, which is a private domain. And then there is also what is called a public domain. And carrying on on Shabbos is totally not allowed. What would be considered an example of a public domain? A public square would be an example of a public domain. If you've ever been in Prague, the big public square over there, that would be considered a public domain. There are debates about how many people need to be through it. Some people say that there need to be 600,000 people that pass through it daily, and that is up for debate. Like I said, I'm not going to get into that because we'd be getting far into the weeds about that. However, the key about this is that it needs to be at least 28 feet wide. That's probably the only measurement that there really is given, and that's something that Maimonides codifies, that it needs to be 28 feet wide. All right, so anyway, now that we've gotten that out of the way, if you cannot see this, I'm holding up a book, and it's in the show notes. It's a very interesting book that I got right at the end of my studying of this topic, and it's called Walking the Line. It is written by an individual by the name of Rabbi Chaim Jachter, I believe is how he pronounces his last name. If it's not, I apologize. And it's a paperback book. It's actually very interesting because it goes through the laws of an Eruv and taking it to its practical modern day aspect of things. Okay, so now that we've talked about that you can't use a public domain or you can't walk in a public domain, how do you do this, right? How can you make sure that you are walking in what would be considered a private domain? Well, it's very easy, and this is where the Eruv comes in, obviously. And the Eruv actually makes everybody as if they are in one domain. What is needed on this? And I'm actually, just as a full disclosure, I am getting a lot of this information. I've gotten it from this book, Rabbi Jachter's book. I have also gotten it from a lecture that was given recently, this week actually, by Rabbi Ruvain Brand, who is a person that lives in Chicago. He is a dean of Talmudic studies in Chicago. So I'm getting a lot of this from there. There are three things that are needed in order to make a domain. And those three things are walls, food, and permission. So let's take these one by one to kind of break down. And again, this is really a 100,000 foot view of Eruv and the topic of Eruv. And it is contentious within the Jewish communities in terms of what makes an Eruv, what doesn't make an Eruv. There have been debates, and I'm going to try to actually talk a little bit about some of the debates that happen here in Brooklyn with regard to that. And but let's go into this. So you need to create walls, basically, around your this area that you want to create an Eruv. So what is the best way to do that? You're going to have the easiest way to do this is by creating a door or an entryway, sort of, that would make up part of the wall, and those do not interrupt. Obviously, as you know from a house, the doorways do not interrupt the wall. They just are kind of part of the wall, and so therefore they go ahead and you have those. And as with doorways, you've got two doorposts and a door lintel. The lintel, however you want to pronounce it. That's fine with me. So you're creating these doorways. When you have the walls, there is a slope that is allowed to the wall to a degree. Hopefully it's not too extreme. That would probably invalidate it. Bodies of water also interrupt these walls, and they cannot be included. You have to actually go around some of these bodies of water as well. Major thoroughfares such as highways and the like are definitely excluded and would actually bisect the Eruv, and you would not be able to cross that with carrying anything. So what can, just to get back to the doorway part of things, what is it that can be made out of doorways is, what can make the doorways are actually telephone poles or electric poles, anything like that. You are allowed to use those, and you're also, if I'm not mistaken, you're also allowed to use the strings or maybe the power cables, or you put your own strings up that go through this. And again, this is an extremely technical thing, so I don't want to go into it too much because I'm not sure how much I necessarily understand it, but I do want to share at least some of these concepts. That's pretty much the topic on the walls portion of it. Folks in the chat, any questions so far? This also really lends itself to major debates that go on about what and where an Eruv can be done. As you may have seen, and if not, I'm going to be adding it into the show notes. There's actually a video that is out with regard to the Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, where there is an Eruv around the island of Manhattan. There is also, then I think that's up for debate whether or not that is valid or not. There's certainly a debate here in Brooklyn whether or not multiple Eruvs that have been set up and kind of overlap so everybody could walk from one place to another. In Brooklyn, where I live, in a largely Jewish section of Brooklyn, this is a big thing because people walk from neighborhood to neighborhood. But this is actually a huge debate that led to a lot of issues when some of these Eruvs came up, because Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was a great halachic decider of Jewish law, and who wrote many responsa. He wrote 9 volumes that were published, and I'm sure more that were not published, which I actually have in my library. He went ahead and he said Brooklyn, for various reasons, is not able to have this kind of an Eruv, and other people disagreed with him, who are also great. There's not in Judaism, as you know, you have 2 Jews, 3 opinions, and this is the case where there were other great people that decided that there could be an Eruv in Brooklyn, and they decided to go ahead and make it. That is the wall portion of it. Now, when you're joining people together, there is in addition to walls, there's one major thing that needs to be done in order for you to be considered like you're part of them. You're part of people. And what would that be? Anybody want to take a guess? So actually, I said this 3 things already, so you should be pretty easy to guess. It would be food. Food is another portion of it. So let's say you are in a complex, let's say a condominium complex, for example, and you want to set up an Eruv. There's no communal Eruv in the overall area where most Jews live, but you wanted to set up in the condominium complex an Eruv. And one of the ways to do this is if everybody shares meals together, and let's say in a communal fashion, and there's one kitchen that you're eating out of, that would be sharing the food, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. However, another way that this is done is that there is a box of everybody chips in, I would say, and uses and chips into for food. And what that generally is that's generally a box of matzah, plain machine, the regular Streitz, Manischewitz, whatever other brands of matzah that you can come up with. Those are the types of matzah that are used. They're usually kept in a shul. That is how it is done with food. Now we come to the third portion of this, which is also, I find very interesting, and that is the portion about permission. And what that means is that if you have non-Jews that are there in this Eruv area that you want to set up, how do you go ahead and do that? Right? How do you go ahead and do such a thing? And so the answer is, the short answer is that you would need permission from the non-Jews. Okay, very well and good. On a small, very micro level, that's very easy. You go to each individual and you ask them. Let's say, again, using the condominium complex as our example here, you could go ask any non-Jews that live in the condominium complex, and you could set this up, and it's okay. The other issue, or let's say, actually not the other issue, but let's say we want to go ahead and we want to do this on a more macro level. So we're talking about doing it for an entire neighborhood. How do you go about doing that? And that is an interesting question. And this is a question that the sages of the Talmud had solved and have solved, and how we do it in our modern parlance, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, is that we generally rely on the mayor or the local municipality or the local police department and get permission from them. So if I'm not mistaken, I know that there are actually some Eruvim, which is the plural for an Eruv, that are community-based here in New York that do that. They go to the mayor and they ask the mayor permission. I believe it's every year that has to be renewed and get permission for it. And what is the reason for this, that they go to one of these people, is because they have the ability on an emergency basis to go in and enter homes. So that's why they might say that it's the police or it's the mayor's office. These are individuals that have that ability to go into homes on an emergency basis. That is what is actually goes on over here. And so once they get permission and the other two criteria are met, then you go ahead and you have yourself an Eruv. And where this comes in, it's very interesting, and this could actually lead to a lot of debate within the city. And you have seen this in slightly northern New York and also northern New Jersey, where Jews are moving into some of these towns because they want to get out of Brooklyn and New York City, and quite honestly, don't blame them at all. Even though I'm still here, but that's a different story for a different time. One of the things that they want to do is they want to set up an Eruv, so this way people can go back and forth. They could carry kids to shul, to the synagogue. They can go ahead and use strollers, and it makes life a lot simpler for a Shabbos. Some of the non-Jews, for whatever reason, and we'll leave it at that, some of the non-Jews do not like this idea, and they complain about it, and they say that this is, there's whatever reason they don't want to have the Eruv, and they try to put pressure on the town. There have been cases where I'm trying to think of the cases. There were a couple of cases in southern New Jersey, actually, where they tried to invalidate the Eruv for various reasons on a legal basis, United States legal basis, I should say, not a Jewish legal basis. And so they went ahead and they tried to do it. I think that there was an issue with First Amendment rights in those cases in southern New Jersey, and so they went ahead and they stopped it. They stopped this, but it is because people are afraid of Jews moving into the neighborhood, overly driving up the value, and maybe reducing the way of life. Again, I don't want to get involved in that. That is not the reason that I am doing this, and I don't want to talk about those issues, because I don't know them. Those have been some of the issues. In fact, and I can't remember who it was, but who's being quoted, but I'll tell you the story. I was in Palo Alto, California one time. I had to be there over a Shabbos, and the rabbi of the synagogue over there, the synagogue's name is Emek Bracha, and the rabbi there is, I believe he's still there, his name is Rabbi Feldman, very nice man, have had chats with him, and he talked on his Shabbos morning sermon, and they were trying to get a Eruv put together for Palo Alto, and they were running into some political issues with that. And he quoted an English journalist who was commenting in, I think, the Times of London, maybe some other place, about the Eruv going up in London. And his basic line was, and I don't remember it, and it's the line has always stuck with me. It's very funny because the line has always stuck with me, but I can't remember it exactly. But the line was sort of, it's as crazy as it is for them to believe that this helps or makes a difference, it's crazier for us to argue that it doesn't. That's something along the lines of it, and I found it a very interesting approach to how to. And his point was just basically live and let live. This is not a big deal. It's not anything that's going to have major change, with things. So anyway, that is the overall concept of Eruv in a nutshell. Any personal experience. Narco-Bidenist asked, any personal experience with an Eruv? Yes, I've had lots of personal experiences with an Eruv. Not building one, not putting one up, but I guess that the most, when I go out of town, when I go, back in the day when pre-COVID, when we used to travel and we used to go go somewhere for a Shabbos, a lot of the out-of-town places that we used to go do have an Eruv. Where my sister lives in Chicago, there's an Eruv, and when we go to visit them for Shabbos, they have one. Or my sister-in-law lives in Muncie, they have an Eruv also, and Muncie, New York, they have an Eruv also. Not Muncie, Indiana, that's a totally different place, but they have an Eruv as well, and I take full advantage of that Eruv because it's a legitimate thing. Here in New York, here in Brooklyn, I don't do it based on a lot of different things. Again, I guess you could say that the upshot is that my people whom I respected and the dean, they're unfortunately both not with us any longer, but the deans or the Rosh Yeshiva of my yeshiva were not fans of this Eruv, so I decided not to go ahead with it. I am kind of agnostic about it otherwise. When my brother-in-law lived here in Brooklyn, my wife's sister's family, when they lived here in Brooklyn still, and they actually did use the Eruv, and the first response to him that I had was, great, when are you guys coming over for a meal? Because they had considerably a lot more kids than we had, and that would be easier for them to come on a Shabbos for a meal without this. With the Eruv than without it. So it's a, like I said, it can be a political hot potato sometimes, which is kind of ironic because the idea of an Eruv is to create some harmony and to create a sense of unity within the community, and sometimes it just does not happen, and that's really a shame. And in life you have to have. Actually, in this book, Rabbi Jactor has, as I hold it up to the camera yet again, is, let me find it because I was looking through it yesterday, where he talks about the strict and lenient making allowances for each other. And that is something that I think everybody in life needs to deal with and needs to know how to deal with, to respect those other opinions and make sure that they are they are, you're okay with them. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyhow, that is the whole thing about Eruv that I've got to say. Does the treatment of an Eruv change during Passover? DJ, excellent question. You know what? That is a really excellent question. So what happens is, prior to Passover, they actually get a new box they put a new box of matzahs there, and it renews it every Passover. If that makes any sense at all, that's exactly what it does. It just renews it every Passover. So you would have to deal with, you have that. But DJ, thank you for the question. That is an excellent question. Otherwise, the treatment of an Eruv does not change. It just gets the lease is renewed, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. And again, you'd probably have to ask a real rabbi about those types of things for that, in terms of when that happens and how that happens. But that's pretty much from what I understand. That is the deal. I mean, and it's actually an interesting question, because if you live in an apartment building, you have similar issues to that as well, where every apartment is its own domain. And so if your kids want to go from one apartment to another apartment and carrying stuff before you're invited out to a meal, or a potluck type of meal on a Shabbos, and you need to bring stuff from your apartment. How do you go ahead and do that? And you also have to create an Eruv within the apartment building for a lot of times, unless according to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, unless the apartment is owned completely by Jews, or not the apartment, but the building is owned by a Jew, therefore then you don't need one, according to his opinion. So anyway, that is that in a nutshell. And if we don't have any more questions, let's get on to the segment I think everyone has been waiting for, and it's the new segment, which is going to be called "The Goyim Know, Shut It Down." And unfortunately, I don't have a good soundboard. I don't have any soundboard, actually, but I would love to get something for that, and maybe I'll try to find something. So, as some of you, we're mostly the Fifth Column podcast Discord channel is mostly a political podcast, political followers. And there was a story from New York Magazine this week that talked about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is QAnon adjacent, more than adjacent, I guess you could say, talking about a couple of years ago, actually, I think this was a couple of years ago, where she talked about wildfires in California being started by a giant space laser that was owned by the Rothschild family. Now, usually the Rothschilds are used in shorthand as for the Jews, and so this created obviously a lot of screaming and yelling. We've all pretty much known that she is a nut. From other stuff that she has said, this pretty much only cemented it. And it's if you look at news commenting sites such as Reddit or others, there is a lot of talking about how the Republicans need to really shut this down and shut her down, and I believe that she definitely needs to be censured in all of it. I can definitely tell you that this is not true. There is no giant space laser. Actually, let's take a step back. Yes, obviously there is no giant space laser. But let's just say for a second, let's believe all the conspiracy theories. The Jews own the media. The Jews have a giant space laser. Don't you think that if they had a giant space laser, that they would not, since the Jews own the media, they would not allow the story to get out? To me, that's just a little bit of critical thinking that you need to take in there and try to believe for a second, right? The Jews own the media. Why is it that they are letting the story get out? Unless we want you to know. But anyhow, that question rang into my head right away when I saw this article. Also, thank you very much to Dash Riprock, who is not actually in the chat tonight, but thank you very much for Dash Riprock. Thank you very much for that link. And there was some more nonsense. Ren, who is also not in the channel tonight, and I'm calling you all out. Yes. She pointed out some Twitter nonsense that went on, which was basically blaming the wokeness, quote unquote, of a lot of Jews for this type of belief, but I don't think that is necessarily the case. By the way, both of these links, the link to the to the New York Magazine article and the Twitter stuff is going to be up in the show notes once I get that up gets the show uploaded. Any event, we have this little problem, and basically what I was going to say is the wokeness. This is not the issue, because this is a problem that exists both on the right and on the left. It doesn't matter how woke or how alt-right you are subject to this belief and anti-Semitism that the media believes in everything. You'll either believe George Soros is the one that is the root of all evil if you're on the alt-right, or you're going to believe that Sheldon Alderson, I guess was at this point, since he's not with us anymore, Sheldon Alderson is the root of all evil for the Jews at that point. But you take a look, you have an individual and Jonah Goldberg actually brought it up, and maybe I'll post his G file from Friday, where he talks about the Jew controlling the weather. Let me tell you something, folks. If we controlled the weather, I would not be having about 17 inches of snow expected for tomorrow. That's all I'm saying. But in addition to that, these are issues. You have a guy. You have a guy like Louis Farrakhan, who, in the Nation of Islam, who is heavily anti-Semitic, and people still embrace him on the left. And yes, they do give free breakfasts, as Michael C. Moynihan likes to say, but that does not stop and excuse the anti-Semitic behavior and attitudes that they have. So this is an issue both on the right and on the left. And actually, I'm not, I don't want to quote chapter and verse on this from both sides, but you have it, and it's consistently been a problem. And it's unfortunate that it's rearing its ugly head right again. I'm not a fan, obviously, of that, but that is. That's, I guess, my quick take on it. I don't want to take really a lot of hot takes on it, but and also Dash Riprock is the one that suggested the goyim knows shut it down as the name of the segment. So I definitely thank him, and cheers to you, Dash. Thank you. Any other questions that you guys want to ask in the chat over here? Okay. So, folks, that is it for this episode. I thank you all for joining us. I thank you for listening in. And once again, I am Aaron Benedict, and I am not a rabbi.